But when you step off that aeroplane, you feel so small, and you realize that the world is so big and bold, and there's so much to see and do and experience. And that for me is just so exciting.
Welcome to the Culture Lounge podcast from Assouline, a curated sonic experience that brings together artists, visionaries, and tastemakers in conversation from around the world. I'm your curator, Alex Assouline. For the past 30 years, Assouline has created books at the center of culture and luxury, covering everything from wine and watches to fashion, lifestyle, travel, and sports. Now, we're inviting you into our world through a new and exciting medium. Today, from London, we'll expand our horizons with Melinda Stevens and Delevingne. Melinda Stevens is the former global editor of Condé Nast Traveller and a brand and content strategist. Delevingne is a model, actress, and citizen of the world. At the intersection of travel, fashion, culture, and lifestyle, you'll find Melinda and Poppy. I know they'll have a lot to talk about. So now, let's enter the Culture Lounge.
Hello, Melinda.
Hi, Pops.
Or Auntie Min, as you are more affectionately known to me.
I know that Aunt Monica actually was quite damning when I was younger. Now, of course, I love it, but
You've learned to accept it.
yes, with both arms.
It's so exciting to get to do this with you today, to talk about something that we both love so
Passionate
much.
about.
Very passionate about travel.
And we've had many trips together over the years, and our most recent one was making me giggle last night as I was thinking about it, and in fact it makes me giggle whenever I think about it, which was that amazing trip in Mexico. And to be honest, it was a coincidence that we crossed over. You were there on a totally separate trip, and I'd come with my family unbeknownst to each other, and then we had about 4 days with each other.
I'd gone through something quite big personally and had gone off to Tulum to go find myself. Sorry to sound like such a cliche, but that's actually what my objective was. The last couple of days we crossed over and had so much fun. And
Yes.
we started off with, I think we ended up doing, it was the kind of real version of a lazy river where
Yes.
we wore life jackets, but instead of wearing them as life jackets, we wore them as sort of knickers.
This was on instruction. This wasn't
on
us
instruction.
spontaneously
No, we
thinking
weren't.
that we should wear these as alternative bikini bottoms.
We weren't being weird. That's what we were told to do.
We were in that kind of mindset. We were signing up for everything.
Yeah.
And this was just one of those things that we signed up for. So we sped across this lake and we got to the other side, and the lovely gentleman who was guiding us said, yes, please can you remove your life jackets as they are and stick your legs through them, through the arm sockets instead.
It's really classy.
It was a good look. Thank you for sending the picture this morning. It was.
Yeah, you're welcome. I thought you needed a quick reminder of that.
And then what proceeded to happen is down this natural series of waterways, and with this unbelievably bright, clear, crystalline water.
Yeah.
We just, we bobbed and floated.
Bobbed and floated and giggled.
I
and sort
think
of
we
lay
giggled.
back. I don't know why we could not stop laughing.
I don't
like
know.
that.
One of us started, and then that was that,
It
and
was
we
contagious.
were off. I don't think we said a single word. It was like the most natural form of therapy. This was all pretty alternative and wonderful. And we also did, I don't know if you remember, the Temescal.
I'm never going to forget the Temescal because I basically said to you, come on, you've got to do something spiritual with me, which you were, of course, as you always are, up for it. And there was that lovely firekeeper with the hot coals. And we went into the Temescal, and your two daughters sat on the beach and waited for us. We were in there for probably a few hours.
It felt like at least 17.
And we sort of went in feeling quite excited about the whole experience, and then came out looking like sort of sand monsters because we'd sort of buried ourselves under the sand. I think we were singing, we were crying, sweating.
We were sweating profusely.
Swaying.
Swaying.
It was so I mean, sort of out of body. It was such an out of body
It was
experience.
extraordinary,
and
actually.
almost quite animalistic.
Yes,
in a
very.
way, to survive it, to kind of get
Yes.
through it.
Definitely, there were times when I was like, I need to get out of here. Also, what was funny is, do you remember when I arrived, you were incredibly burnt because you look after your skin because you have beautiful skin and you look after it, sensationally, but for whatever reason, something hideous had happened and you'd burnt yourself to a crisp.
It was only half of my body. It's because I was on my own and had been for a few weeks, and I was too embarrassed to ask anyone to help me put sunscreen on to the parts I couldn't reach, and I lay out and fell asleep for about 5 hours. So it was a sort of half beetroot sunburn,
It was
half of my body.
yeah, and there was a very, very definitive line on your back where I actually thought it was the design of your dress. Yes. I thought your burn was a dress. It was so red.
And do you also remember coming out of the Temescal, and the two girls had been waiting for us on the beach, and we sort of had a little lunch, and right next to us, we were next to a retreat where about 50 people were doing quite an intense breathwork session.
Yes.
Anyway, I don't know if anyone has ever done an intense breathwork session, but the sounds that sort of came out of this tent were, well, how do you describe it?
Well, I would say sexual. And I
Say it how it is.
I because whichever way I was going to say, like
Orgasmic?
yes, coital, any of these. And so, do you remember the look on the girls' faces?
God, I couldn't look at them. They couldn't look at us.
They could hear these noises, but they couldn't see what was happening. So for them, they had it was trauma.
Trauma written all over their faces.
Yeah.
And I couldn't hold eye contact with either of them. So
Going back to more innocent times, I was thinking
think we
about
should quickly.
to my first holidays with you, my first memories of you being away, and I think that has to be at my stepmother's and your step granny's beautiful villa in Cap Ferrat, and being on that little stony shingle beach, and you would always be naked, and we've talked about
Naked
this before.
apart from with jelly shoes.
Oh, of course.
Always with a jelly
The
shoe.
classic jelly.
Yeah.
And you had, bless you, quite a small crop of quite thin hair. And
White as well.
white.
Quite wiry.
And so everyone else on the beach would be that classic Riviera scene of the French when they're really, really digging deep onto their August trips. Brown as berries, everyone naked, glistening, reading the, Nice Matin. Just, they brought their own picnic and with their umbrellas and everything set up for the day. And in the middle there, you would be this shining white beacon of absolute little baby, little orangutan you look
With
like.
major eye bags, like I'd been up for 10 days.
Yes.
And white, wiry hair. Yeah, I was slightly looked like a kind of Uncle Fester from the Addams Family vibes.
And
I
you
didn't
would-
quite fit in.
Yes, well, I could spot you for sure. And then you would be picking up treasure.
Oh yes, it was
Beach
always
treasure.
we always went exactly searches for treasure, for little pieces that we thought were emeralds, which of course were just glass that had been little bits of glass that had been worn away. But we would just spend endless hours on the beach with our buckets searching for these little pieces of treasure in jelly shoes,
Yes.
and those were definitely my sort of happiest holiday
Yeah.
memories spent with you.
Oh. So as time went on, those summer holidays, they become kind of ritualistic, don't they? They become a kind of rite of passage, and you would grow up and I would grow up. And so then, we would hit the Cadillac.
We'd hit the town when I came of age.
Or just before you came of age. I would have
a little
thought.
bit, maybe a little early.
A little soupçon but before schedule.
But thank you so much for taking me there and leading me up the garden path.
Yes. So sorry. I've been such a wonderful influence in so many ways. But also, happy times at lovely places along that coast, like La Guérite. La Guérite now has become it feels like very party. But when we used to go, you could only reach it by boat. It was on a rock just off the coast from Cannes. And there was a big monastery at the top. And it was a very, very simple restaurant at the bottom.
Yeah, it
So you would
was.
swim or get a little, putt to the restaurant and have
Absolutely.
delicious
And they
lunches
had
there.
pedalos, of course,
Yes.
which I'd always beg you to come on with me. It was very sort of simple back then. I think over time it became quite...
Yes.
Became
More
a little
festive.
more kind of chic and festive.
Yeah.
For sure. But Min, for someone who's traveled as much as you have, when you travel, how does it make you feel? Like, what does it sort of bring to your life, would you say?
Oh, gosh. I always say that when I'm on a proper adventure and I'm moving, I think there's something that's intrinsically important about the actual moving about the world. And when that's happening and it's spontaneous and it's something I hadn't predicted and it's somewhere I don't know, firstly, I feel like the meniscus of myself, which is like when you have a glass and the water is right up to the lip of the top and then just that little bit over. That's how I feel. I feel like the best of myself in those times. I also feel very thrilled and comforted by how big the world is and by how large it is and by... I remember at a particular point when I was growing up, I became quite... Depressed is too strong a word, but like a boredom or a lackadaisical feeling that everyone was like everyone else. And of course, when you travel, you feel that you remember that the opposite is true.
Yeah.
How about you?
For me, it's just such a sort of sensory overload that I yearn. I mean, I feel like all of us, when we're in our sort of home bubbles and we're, you know, working every day and we're with our families, and we get into a sort of routine. And then you step onto an airplane or onto a train or whatever you're doing, and you get off and you're sort of hit with, as I just said, this sort of sensory overload, and your senses are heightened and you're suddenly very aware and you're stepping out of your comfort zone and you're exhilarated, and it's exciting. And a little bit, as you were just saying, you know, when you're in that kind of day-to-day life and world that you're living in, you feel so sort of, you know, you feel big in your world. But when you step off that aeroplane, you feel so small. And you realize that the world is so big and bold, and there's so much to see and do and experience. And that for me is just so exciting.
I mean, you've been to some extraordinary parts of the world with Save the Children. How have you experienced that?
Well, I've been so lucky, well, actually with my other mad aunt, as I like to so affectionately call you guys, the wonderful Bella, who's worked for Save the Children for as long as I can remember. And I've been lucky enough to go to some incredible places in the world, such as Ethiopia and the DRC, and most recently Turkey, where I went earlier this year, that suffered 2 major earthquakes last year where, you know, almost 3 million people were displaced. And when you go on these sort of trips, they're incredibly humbling. I mean, you get to meet these people that have experienced so much and you get to hear their stories. And, you know, they've suffered so much sort of overwhelming destruction and displacement and all of these things, but they have so much hope and resilience and strength. And when you come back from these kind of trips, they stay with you forever. You are forever changed. And I just feel very honored that I get to experience these places like that and meet these incredible people.
Yes, extraordinary. In fact, it was with Bella that I went on one of my most amazing trips to Borneo.
Yeah.
A group of school friends and I went to go and visit. Again, she was working for Save the Children. We went to visit her where she'd been living for a year in a longhouse right up river, miles away from anywhere. And it was that first time when I realized just how people's perspective on the world was just so incredibly different. And when we got greeted at the longhouse by the entire village, we had to walk on these kind of gongs, and we'd been trekking all morning through the jungle, and before that we'd been on these longboats, and before that we'd been on a plane, and before that we'd been on another plane, and that had been on another plane. I mean, it had taken us planes, trains, and automobiles to get to this place. And on the final morning, we get to the village, all this music playing, drums are going, we walk across these incredible gongs. I had to machete the head off a chicken. And then that night, we ended up having this interesting conversation where firstly they said, thank you so much for coming all this way from the mouth of the river. And we went, guys, you've got no idea. They had no concept at this time of just, you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
This patch of their world was here, and then the rest of the world was, you know, some mere slip of a line that was, you know, barely in consciousness. Thank you so much for coming from all the way from the mouth of the river. And then please tell us about your life and tell us about the ways that you live. And Bella, because of course she's so incredibly clever and genius like this, was talking about, you know, when you're living in a cold climate, how you need to stay warm and how therefore you need heating, and therefore to pay for your heating, how you go out and get a job, and how when you get a job, you earn money, and then because you're on your job, you can't wash your clothes, so you have to buy a washing machine. Listening to her explaining to them, the whole village, the differences in our lives it really blew me away.
My God.
If anyone ever asks me my travel advice, which they sometimes do, I always go just say yes, yes, yes to everything.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes
Always
to
say
everything.
yes.
I've been to like Norway to go and see the white lights for about 8 hours,
Yeah.
which didn't make any sense at all, but
Yeah.
it was
Did you get to see
still
them?
worth it. No. But what happened was I thought, oh my God, why am I doing this? I'm on my own. I'm in a bus with about 75 other people, and I'm leaving in about 2 hours. A thing that still stays in my mind to this day is like at a certain point, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and all these people started piling out from a nightclub. Even though it was completely light, as if it was day.
Yeah.
The behavior of the humans was, you could see in their eyes and the way, and their gaits, and the way they had their arms around their, that it was night behavior.
Right.
And that
But
was
basically broad daylight.
But basically broad daylight.
So discombobulating.
Very discombobulating. But I love, you know, those
Yeah,
moments.
of course. I mean, I think for both of us that we would probably have the same response to this sort of question, which is, you know, in terms of vacation destinations, where do we both keep going back to? Like, which places in the world keep calling us back, do you think?
It's funny, isn't it? Because we would both probably be reticent about saying them in one way, but it would be hypocritical not to realize that, you know, we're part of that system in places like hotspots like Saint-Tropez and Ibiza, because I do get annoyed when people don't call themselves tourists. We are tourists, so, and if you try and separate yourselves from the problems of over-tourism, you're being a bit foolish. We're part of it, but for sure, though Saint-Tropez and Ibiza are now very overexplored and well-trodden, they're places that we've been going to for a very long time, and of course, therefore, hold very happy memories, going sights, sounds, you know, the markets of Saint-Tropez.
Oh my gosh, the smells when you enter those markets and you're hit with the smells of those spices and olives and cheeses and sort of antique lace everywhere, and your feet would get so dusty from the sort of market floor. And
Yes, I love
I feel
those dusty
like,
feet.
and when then you think about sort of Ibiza and that almost, we were talking about it the other day, that moment that you had with sort of Esvedra.
Oh, yes.
When you touch Esvedra. And it takes us right back to the Temescal and the firekeeper.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? We're looking for meaning. We're looking for meaning. But so Esvedra, of course, is the rock that they say has this incredible magnetism, and you can't actually land on Esvedra, but we shimmied the boat right up, and we all turn and turn. You know, put our hands on the rock to feel its
magic.
To feel its magic. And I don't mind whether it gave me the magic or didn't give me the magic. I feel like it gave me the magic, and sometimes that's what you need.
Of course it did. But where do you, and I feel like I'm going to throw you under the bus, well, I'm not going to throw you under the bus because you would never speak to me again, but you know, when you think about where people should visit, but you secretly hope remains a secret for a little bit longer. I know what you would say, but I do want to keep my friendship and love for you going.
Thank
so
you.
I'm not going.
Thank you for respecting this.
I'm not going to say, but I do know where yours would be.
Well,
if you want to touch on it.
We have been going for many years to this island in Greece, which is in fact an island where my husband used to go every year with his brothers when they were small boys. And they would go and stay with their uncle, who had a dwelling, and I will call it that was like practically kind of riven out of the rock. On one side of this house is literally the incline of the rock. And he took me there when we were dating, and I absolutely hated it. and the wind whipped off and scoured me in the face, and it would never let down, and there was peculiar people living there, and we just didn't go back for 20 years. And then 20 years later, we went back, and I fell passionately, wildly, crazily in love with it. And now we go as a group of like more and more family members. From his side, I have to say, which is really nice, because one of the wonderful things about going on holiday with somebody else's side of the family is like you can luxuriate as they have their own politics, because normally it's like my family and my family is politics. So
You can
I'm
stay
like,
out of it,
I can stay out of it.
basically.
That is a holiday in itself. And it's still a very, very, very simple island in the sense that there's no air conditioning. You can't put paper down the loo. It is a hot rock of basic beauty. The beaches are wild. You turn completely feral. It's in a curious twist. It's at one point, both the head of the MI5 and the head of the SAS, I think, had houses there, like super off grid. So that's emblematic of the nature of the place. And that's where we go to be blasted around like.
And really what a holiday should feel like.
Yes, because we're wearing the same thing every
Exactly.
day, falling asleep in those clothes, getting up in those
Makeup
clothes.
doesn't exist, a hairbrush doesn't
I
exist.
There aren't really mirrors there.
Perfect.
It's completely liberating and it's completely free and it's fun beyond words. But I vowed not to say the name because people are coming, but I wish they
Don't worry, I'm going to
did
drop it in at some later point in this recording. I'm just going to whisper it, so listen out.
Do it in code, do it in code.
I'll do it in code.
Do it in code that only genius can
You all a
understand.
massive favour here.
Only Alan Turing will be able to.
And when you think about when you travel and you feel the most alive, like what destination?
Well, I was going to ask you that because I bet I know.
I mean, for me, it would probably have to be New York City. And I know that probably sounds quite sort of, but for me, when I touch down in New York, it's immediate butterflies and anticipation and what is going to happen. Am I going to survive this? And who am I going to see and what am I going to be doing? And I actually, gosh, we had quite an amazing
We had a very
trip to New York together with the Mad Aunt, so you and Bella,
yeah,
and Chloe and I, my older sister.
yes.
And the four of us went on a kind of...
We went for Halloween.
We went for Halloween.
We stayed at the Bowery.
We stayed at the Bowery. I was throwing a big Halloween bash at the Boom Boom Rooms.
Yes.
And I think the night, we almost didn't make it. Because
Very, very
the night
nearly didn't
before,
make it.
we got completely and utterly carried away, went to the infamous Balthazar for sort of duck shepherd's pie, went back to the Bowery, so ended up bumping into Stephen Dorff
Yes.
in the hotel reception where we drank sort of 95 Moscow mules in those very, very cold silver tumblers.
Yes, I love those kind of.
And then
sweaty
ended up
silver tumblers.
going to a room party where... Do you remember?
We had this. It was so we were really, really kind of chewing the cud, and we hadn't seen each other, I think, for a while, and we were all just kind of really going into our deep and darkest truths and secrets and biggest sense of reveal. And at a certain point, about 5 a.m, both you and I had an arm around this sweet man, and I turned to you and I said, "And so, how do you know Poppy?" And you made this face at me, and you went, "But how do you know Melinda?" And he said, "To be honest, ladies, I've never met either of you before in my life, and you just brought me up from the bar. I just came up with you." And we said, "Delightful young man, you need to leave us now.
Immediately.
And you need to sign an NDA because there is nothing that you don't know about our lives right now."
I mean, he was almost the therapist
Yes.
of the group. But the whole time, I thought he was your long-lost
Yes.
buddy that you've known since birth.
He emanated that energy.
And you thought vice versa, exactly the same thing. And therefore, I mean, honestly, he could write a book on
Yes.
us. And then the next day, we had to get up.
So Bella and I lying in bed, and the door opens, and you walk in, and you are head to toe in an absolutely, I mean, a kind of e-cat body stocking, and a boot that was so high, it was like with the most extraordinary wedge, and then perched vertiginously, but with an intrinsic wobble. was
Definitely
this
on a tilt.
huge unicorn horn. And you were like, right, ladies,
We've got to go.
Got to get our
Party
shimmy on.
started an hour ago, and you're all in bed in a heap on the floor, basically. And we need to get to this
Off we went again into
party,
the night.
and off we went into the night. So yes, New York, where I definitely feel the most alive when I arrive, and definitely the most dead when I leave. So, Auntie Min, what tips do you have for someone who wants to curate, would you say, the kind of perfect vacation, the perfect holiday?
I grew up with a father, your grandfather, and my stepmother, who were great travelers in the sense that they really, really did things properly. And unbelievably fortunate to go out into the plains of the Serengeti or the Mara with unbelievable guides, and you know, to Ephesus with unbelievable teachers and professors. And at the time, obviously, that wasn't there. You know, that didn't cut the mustard.
Right.
But now, I think that was somehow inbuilt in my system. And now, if you want to do those, an expression I never used to use, and now do those once-in-a-lifetime trips, I think if you have a very, very, very good tour operator, then it can change everything. 2 trips that I've done recently, both with Vivian, actually, and both at the top of their game, and both with extraordinary tour operators. As one was Egypt, with Abercrombie in Kent. I mean, if you're going to Cairo and Luxor and you're sailing down the Nile on the Nile boats, the most beautiful pot-bellied, sailed, old boats, and you want to really understand the country and really understand where it's been and where it comes from, this extraordinary civilization that ruled, you know, the world for 5,000 years, you know, in comparison to, let's say, America that's only been around for 250 years, then being in the right hands...
Yes.
With guys from places like A&K will change everything.
No, I totally agree. It's that sort of thing that you think it's almost like a sort of cop-out to get, you know, an operator or someone who knows and can create an itinerary and do all of that. But when I went to Japan, we had that with Triptych Travel. And they organized this trip from sort of Tokyo to Kyoto to Osaka, and it was organized within an inch of its life. And that might sort of sound sort of, you know, not very spontaneous, but it just meant that the trip was so seamless and we got to do every aspect that we really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And
you don't want to miss stuff.
And you don't want to miss anything when you do those trips and you travel all that way. And
what about coming up, honey? Where are you going, or what do you want to do if...
Well, I'm actually off to Corsica next week with some friends, which I've never been to Corsica. So that's very exciting. I love going to new places and experiencing new places. So that's very exciting. And I would say top of my bucket list would have to be Bhutan. The kind of the drama of Bhutan and being, you know, that close to the sort of Himalayas and the monasteries and the fortresses and the sort of the richness and adventure. And I mean, yeah, Bhutan for me. That's top of my list. How about you? Where are you off to next?
This is so weird because I used to get pushed around in a pushchair till I was about 15 because I was so lazy, but I've become passionate about walking. And I have walked the length of the River Tess recently, the river that we grew up on, because it's a chalk stream and it's so beautiful. And I think I'm planning more walks because I find following maps so brilliant. I find being in my own head. If you're on a trajectory and you're putting one foot in front of each other, I think wonderful thoughts come, and there are lots more walks that I'd like to be doing.
Beautiful answer. And a beautiful way to wrap this up. Auntie Min, I love you.
I love you so much.
And we both love travel very, very much.
To more trips.
To more trips ahead.
Big kiss. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Culture Lounge. If you want to dive deeper into the world of travel, Assouline has many books to get your way, like Secret Stays, African Adventures, and of course, our iconic travel series. I'll leave you with a fun bit of trivia I learned from our first travel series book, Ibiza Bohemia. Did you know that Ibiza and Formentera are known collectively as Las Pitiusas, or the Pine Islands? It was a name that the Greeks gave them because of the richly fragrant pine trees that covered all the island, a scent that you can also find in our Ibiza Bohemia scented candle. In our next chapter, we're delving into the world of watches with Jeff Hess and Mike Nouveau. Subscribe to the Culture Lounge so you don't miss it. For more inspiration, head to assouline.com, where culture meets luxury. À bientôt.